Dr. Amy Carter pressed her face against the observation window of the human research ship New Dawn and stared at the strange world below them. The planet Kepler 442c looked like a giant marble made of blue and green swirls with massive mountain ranges that reached up toward the clouds. Amy had been studying alien life forms for 10 years, but she had never seen anything like what the sensors were picking up down there. The readings showed something massive and alive, moving slowly across the northern continent, something that was at least 200 feet long, and gave off heat signatures that suggested it was warm-blooded. Jake Miller, her research partner, walked up behind her and looked at the same data on his tablet. Jake shook his head and frowned at the numbers. The thing down there was bigger than any creature they had ever found on any world. Amy could see that. Jake was worried about going down to investigate, but Amy felt excited rather than scared. She had always believed that understanding alien life was the key to making friends across the galaxy instead of enemies. Captain Lisa Thompson called all the science team to the main briefing room. Amy and Jake joined 6 other researchers around the large metal table. The captain was a tall woman with short brown hair, who had been exploring space for 15 years. She had seen many strange things, but even she seemed puzzled by what they had found. The captain activated the holographic display above the table and showed them a 3-dimensional image of the creature. The thing looked like a dragon from old Earth stories, but it was real, and it was hurt badly. The sensors showed that parts of its body were damaged, and that it had not moved very much in the past. Amy studied the image carefully and noticed something that made her heart ache. The creature appeared to be blind. Its eyes were covered with some kind of dark substance that looked like it was eating away at the tissue around them. Amy had seen similar damage in her research on parasitic organisms, but never on such a large scale. Dr. Ben Walsh, the team biologist, pointed at the display and explained what he thought they were seeing. He believed the creature was dying from some kind of infection that had been spreading through its body for a long time. The dark substance around its eyes seemed to be the source of the problem, and it appeared to be slowly killing the magnificent being. Amy felt a strong urge to help the creature, even though she knew it could be dangerous. Jake argued that they should observe from orbit and collect data without making direct contact. He worried that something big enough to be seen from space might not be friendly to small humans who tried to approach it. But Amy had spent years developing new medical technology that could heal damaged tissue in ways that had never been possible before. Her nanobiotic healing system used tiny robots that could repair cells and fight infections. At the molecular level, she had tested it successfully on dozens of different alien species that they had encountered during their travels. The captain listened to both sides of the argument and then made her decision. They would land near the creature, but they would take every safety precaution possible. Amy would be allowed to attempt contact, but only if the creature seemed peaceful, and only with a full security team protecting her. 2 hours later, Amy found herself walking across the rocky surface of an alien world toward the largest living thing she had ever seen up close. The dragon-like creature was lying on its side near a lake of crystal clear water. Its scales were a beautiful mixture of silver and blue that seemed to shimmer in the light of the alien sun. As Amy got closer, she could see that the creature was definitely suffering. The dark substance around its eyes had spread down its face and seemed to be causing it constant pain. Its breathing was labored and shallow, and Amy could tell that it did not have much time left if something was not done to help it. Jake stayed 20 feet behind Amy with his medical scanner running constantly. He was monitoring both Amy and the creature for any signs of danger. The security team, led by Commander Ryan Phillips, had formed a protective circle around the area, with their weapons ready, but not pointed directly at the dragon. Amy slowly approached the creature's massive head and began to speak in a soft, gentle voice. She did not know if it could understand human language, but she hoped that her tone would communicate her peaceful intentions. The creature opened one eye and looked at her with what seemed like curiosity rather than hostility. The dragon made a sound that was somewhere between a purr and a growl, but Amy could tell it was not threatening her. Instead, it seemed to be trying to communicate something. The sound was filled with sadness and pain, and Amy felt her heart break for this magnificent being that was suffering alone on an empty world. Amy carefully pulled out her nanobiotic healing device and showed it to the creature. She explained what she wanted to do, even though she was not sure if the dragon could understand her words. She told the creature that she wanted to help heal its eyes and remove whatever was causing it so much pain. The dragon seemed to consider her offer for a long moment, and then slowly lowered its huge head until it was resting on the ground near Amy's feet. This gesture seemed to give Amy permission to try to help, and she carefully activated her healing device. The nanobots flowed out of the device like a silver liquid and began to surround the dark substance around the creature's eyes. Amy watched in amazement as the tiny robots began to break down the parasitic material and repair the damaged tissue underneath. The process took almost an hour, but gradually the creature's eyes began to clear. When the healing was complete, the dragon opened both eyes and looked directly at Amy. The creature's eyes were a brilliant golden color that seemed to glow with intelligence and ancient wisdom. Amy could see recognition and gratitude in those eyes, and she knew that she had just made contact with something truly special. The dragon slowly raised its head and spoke in a voice that seemed to come from deep within its chest. The words were in a language that Amy did not recognize, but somehow she could understand their meaning. The creature was thanking her and telling her that she had just saved not only its life, but something much more important. Amy learned that the dragon was called Zephyros, and that he was the last elder of an ancient species called the Drakmari. He explained that his people had been the keepers of knowledge for thousands of years, and that his blindness had put precious information at risk. Amy had not just healed his eyes, she had saved the wisdom of an entire civilization. Jake ran up to Amy with his scanner. Beeping wildly, the readings showed that the creature was not just healthy now, but was actually much stronger than they had initially thought. The healing had not only removed the parasites, but had somehow enhanced the dragon's natural ability. Told Amy that by healing him, she had triggered an ancient law of his people that bound him to protect her for as long as he lived. He explained that the Drakmari had always remained neutral in galactic conflicts, but that her act of compassion had changed everything. Amy realized that her simple act of kindness toward a suffering creature had just set in motion events that would affect the entire galaxy. The dragon was not just grateful, he was now her sworn protector, and that meant that the knowledge and power of an ancient civilization was now aligned with humanity. As Amy and her team prepared to return to their ship, Zephyros told them that word of what had happened would spread quickly across the galaxy. Many species would want to meet the human who had healed the last Drakmari elder, and many others would see her as a threat to their own plans for power. Amy looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the alien sky and wondered what challenges lay ahead. She had come to this world as a scientist, seeking to understand alien life, but she was leaving as something much more important. She was now the star-blessed healer, and the universe would never be the same. 3 days after Amy healed Zephyros, the communication systems aboard the New Dawn began receiving messages from across the galaxy. Captain Lisa Thompson stared at her screen in disbelief, as request after request poured in from species that humanity had never even heard of before. Each message asked for the same thing. They all wanted to meet the human healer who had restored sight to the last Drakmari elder. Me sat in her laboratory, trying to understand what she had started. When she helped the ancient dragon, her nanobiotic healing technology had worked better than she had ever imagined possible. The tiny robots had not only removed the quantum parasites from Zephyros' eyes, but had somehow enhanced his natural abilities in ways that seemed almost magical. Jake Miller burst into her lab with a worried expression on his face. He carried a datapad that showed the current count of alien ships approaching their position. 47 different species had sent vessels ranging from small scout ships to massive battle cruisers. All of them claimed to come in peace, but Jake was not convinced that their intentions were entirely friendly. Ben Walsh joined them and explained what he had learned about the quantum parasites that had been blinding Zephyros. The parasites were not natural creatures. but were actually weapons created by an unknown enemy thousands of years ago. They had been designed to target the Drakmari, specifically because of their role as knowledge keepers. Amy realized that whoever had created these weapons might still be out there, and might not be happy that she had found a way to defeat them. Her healing technology could potentially be used to counter other bioweapons, which made her both valuable and dangerous to various galactic powers. Zephyros had taken up position near the New Dawn, and his massive form could be seen through every observation window on the ship. The dragon had grown even larger since Amy healed him, and now measured almost 300 feet from nose to tail. His scales had become more brilliant, and he seemed to glow with an inner light that was visible even in space. Captain Thompson called Amy to the bridge and showed her the tactical display the screen showed. Dozens of ships from different species, all moving toward their location. Some were keeping their distance and broadcasting peaceful intentions, while others were approaching more aggressively with weapons powered. Epime watched as a sleek ship with elegant curves and silver hull approached the New Dawn. The vessel was beautiful, but also clearly advanced beyond anything humanity had ever built. Captain Thompson received a communication request from the ship and put it on the main screen. A tall, graceful being with pale blue skin and large dark eyes appeared on the screen. The alien introduced herself as Ambassador Lyra of the Ethereal Collective. She explained that her people had been allies of the Drakmari for over 2,000 years, and that they wanted to thank Amy for saving their ancient friend. But Ambassador Lyra also brought a warning. She told Amy that the Vorthan Syndicate had placed a bounty on her head. The Vorthans were a powerful group of traders and mercenaries who controlled much of the galactic economy. They saw Amy's healing technology as a threat to their profits from selling medical supplies and weapons. Amy felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that her act of compassion had made her a target. The galaxy was apparently full of beings who would rather see suffering continue than lose their ability to profit from it. She began to understand why Zephyros had pledged to protect her commander. Ryan Phillips alerted the captain that 3 unmarked ships were approaching at high speed with their weapons charging. These ships did not respond to communication attempts, and their energy signatures matched known Vorthan Syndicate attack vessels. Zephyros responded before anyone on the New Dawn could react. The ancient dragon moved with impossible speed for something so large and positioned himself directly between the attacking ships and the human vessel. His scales began to glow brighter, and energy seemed to crackle around his massive form. The attacking ships fired plasma weapons at Zephyros, but the energy beams seemed to be absorbed by his scales rather than causing damage. The dragon opened his mouth and released a beam of pure golden light that struck the lead attack ship. The vessel immediately lost power and began drifting helplessly through space. The other 2 attack ships tried to retreat, but Zephyros was faster than they were. He caught up with them easily and disabled both vessels without destroying them. Amy watched in amazement as the dragon carefully captured all 3 ships in some kind of energy field and brought them back toward the New Dawn. Captain Thompson ordered the attacking ships to be brought aboard for investigation. Amy joined the security team as they searched the disabled vessels. They found evidence that confirmed Ambassador Lyra's warning. The ships carried assassination equipment specifically designed to target human physiology. Amy also discovered something that made her blood run cold. The assassination team had detailed information about her nanobiotic technology and plans to steal her research. They were not just planning to kill her, they were planning to take her life, work, and use it for their own purposes. Ben Walsh analyzed the captured equipment and found that it was far more advanced than anything humanity currently possessed. The weapons could have easily penetrated the New Dawn's shields and killed everyone on board if Zephyros had not intervened. Helped Amy review the communication logs from the past few days, and they discovered that the galaxy was dividing into 2 camps. Those who supported Amy and wanted to protect her ability to heal others, and those who saw her as a threat that needed to be eliminated before she could upset the existing balance of power. Ambassador Lyra contacted them again and offered to provide escort ships to help protect Amy from future attacks. She explained that the ethereal collective had decided that Amy represented hope for a better future, where healing was more important than weapons, but Lyra also warned them that the situation was escalating rapidly. More species were choosing sides, and some were preparing for war. The Vorthan Syndicate was calling Amy a dangerous terrorist who threatened galactic stability, while their opponents claimed she was a saint who could bring peace to the universe. Amy felt overwhelmed by the responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders. She had never wanted to be at the center of galactic politics. She had just wanted to help a suffering creature. Now she found herself being called both a savior and a destroyer, depending on who was doing the talkings. Sephiroth spoke to Amy through a communication device that translated his ancient language. He told her that this was always the price of doing what was right in a universe where many preferred the comfort of familiar suffering to the uncertainty of change. The dragon explained that his people had faced similar choices thousands of years ago when they first became knowledge keepers. They could have used their wisdom for their own benefit, but instead chose to remain neutral and help all species equally. This decision had made them trusted, but also vulnerably made her own decision that night. As she looked out at the growing fleet of ships surrounding them, she would not hide or run from those who wanted to harm her. Instead, she would continue to heal and help anyone who needed it, regardless of the political consequences. She began working with Dr. Ben Walsh to modify her nanobiotic technology so it could be used to help more species. The healing robots were already effective against most biological problems, but Amy wanted to make them even better. She wanted to create a version that could heal any injury or disease. No matter how exotic, Jake worried that Amy was making herself an even bigger target, but she had made up her mind. The galaxy was full of suffering and she had the power to reduce it. She would not let fear stop her from doing what she knew was right. Amy worked late into the night, developing new healing protocols. She could see Zephyros keeping watch outside her window. The ancient dragon had become more than just her protector. He had become a symbol of the choice between wisdom and power, between healing and harming. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Admiral Kate Johnson was bringing the entire Third Fleet from Earth to protect Amy. Word had reached humanity that one of their own was at the center of a galactic crisis, and Earth was not going to let their daughter face it alone. Amy realized that her simple act of kindness toward a blind dragon had set in motion events that would determine the future of not just humanity, but every species in the galaxy. The healing had begun, but the real test was still to come. Admiral Kate Johnson arrived in the Kepler system with 127 ships from Earth's Third Fleet, but what she found there was beyond anything she had expected to see. The space around planet Kepler 442c was filled with vessels from dozens of different species, all gathered to protect one human scientist. Amy Carter stood on the bridge of the New Dawn and watched through the main viewing screen as more ships continued to arrive every hour. The ethereal collective had sent 400 of their beautiful silver vessels, while the warrior clans of the Red Rock Federation contributed 1,200 massive battlecruisers. Even species that had been enemies of humanity were sending ships to help protect her. Captain Lisa Thompson showed Amy the latest tactical display, which now tracked over 8,000 allied vessels. The numbers kept growing as word spread that the human healer was under threat from the Vorthan Syndicate and their allies. Amy felt both amazed and terrified by the size of the fleet that had gathered in her name. Katie Brown, her research assistant, helped Amy set up a mobile medical facility aboard Sephiroth's living ship. The ancient dragon had revealed that his vessel was not built from metal and circuits like human ships, but was actually a living creature that had been his companion for centuries. The bioorganic ship could heal itself and adapt to any environment. Ben Walsh was fascinated by the dragon's ship and spent hours studying how it worked. The vessel was larger inside than it appeared from the outside, and contained rooms that seemed to change their function based on what was needed. Amy found herself with a medical bay that was more advanced than anything on Earth. Jake Miller, coordinated with the various alien medical teams who wanted to observe Amy's healing techniques. Representatives from 43 different species had requested permission to study her nanobiotic technology. Amy agreed to share her knowledge freely because she believed that healing should belong to everyone, not just humanity. The first patient Amy treated aboard Zephyro's ship was an ethereal named Saren, who had been injured in a mining accident. Her people were known for their advanced technology, but they had never seen anything like Amy's nanobots. The tiny healing robots repaired Siren's damaged nervous system in just 2 hours. Word of Siren's complete recovery spread through the fleet within minutes. Amy found herself with a long list of patients from species she had never heard of before. Each successful healing brought more ships and more allies, but it also brought more attention from those who saw her as a threat. Commander Ryan Phillips worked around the clock to coordinate security for the growing fleet. He had never imagined that protecting one person would require managing the largest peaceful armada in galactic history. The logistics of keeping so many different species working together were staggering. Darpete Anderson arrived from Earth with a medical delegation that included some of the most brilliant scientists humanity had ever produced. He was Amy's former mentor and had helped her develop the original nanobiotic technology. Pete was amazed by how much Amy had improved the healing system since leaving Earth, but Pete also brought disturbing news from the Galactic Senate. The governing body that tried to maintain peace between species was demanding that Amy be turned over to their custody. They claimed that her technology was too dangerous to remain in the hands of any single species. Even humanity refused to consider the Senate's demand. She had seen how political bodies worked, and she knew that her healing technology would become just another tool for those in power to control those who were not. The nanobots were meant to heal, not to be used as bargaining chips in political games. Firos supported Amy's decision and explained more about the ancient laws that governed his people. The Drakmari had always remained neutral in galactic conflicts, but they had also always protected those who showed true compassion. Amy had earned their protection by healing him without asking for anything in return. The dragon revealed more about the sacred stellar maps that he carried in his mind. These ancient star charts showed the locations of every habitable world and resource rich system in 3 galaxies. The knowledge had been gathered over millions of years and was priceless to any species that wanted to expand their territories. Siros explained that his blindness had left the maps vulnerable to those who would steal them and use them for conquest. Amy had not just healed his eyes, she had protected knowledge that could affect the development of countless civilizations for thousands of years to come. Admiral Johnson met with Amy privately and expressed her concerns about the growing fleet. Earth was proud of what Amy had accomplished, but the Admiral worried that humanity was not ready for the kind of galactic attention they were receiving. The human race was still young compared to most species. Amy understood the Admiral's concerns, but she also knew that humanity could not step back from the role they had been given, whether they were ready or not. Earth was now seen as the home of the healer who could cure any disease. She had made humanity important in galactic politics. Dyer Ben Walsh made a disturbing discovery while analyzing tissue samples from various alien patients. Some of the diseases and injuries he was seeing were not natural. They appeared to be the result of biological weapons, similar to the quantum parasites that had blinded Zephyrosome. Realized that there might be an enemy out there that was deliberately spreading suffering throughout the galaxy. Her healing technology was not just fixing random problems, it was countering a deliberate campaign of biological warfare. Someone was trying to weaken the galaxy from within. Jake discovered communication intercepts that suggested the Vorthan Syndicate was working with unknown partners. The Vorthans were not just trying to protect their profits, they were actively helping spread biological weapons to create more demand for their medical supplies. The revelation that there was a coordinated effort to spread disease and suffering throughout the galaxy changed everything. Amy was not just a healer, she was the primary weapon against an enemy that fed on pain and death. Her nanobots represented hope for every species that had been targeted. Katie Brown helped Amy develop new versions of the healing technology that could be mass-produced and distributed to the fleet. Every ship would carry nanobots that could counter biological weapons and heal their crews. Amy was turning the entire alliance into a mobile hospital. The Ethereal Collective shared their advanced manufacturing technology, with Amy allowing her to produce nanobots faster than ever before. Within days, every ship in the fleet was equipped with healing systems based on Amy's original design. The Alliance had become immune to biological warfare, but the enemy was not going to give up easily. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching the Kepler system. The vessels were unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. They seemed to be made from living tissue and metal fused together in impossible ways. Rose recognized the energy signatures of the approaching fleet, and his massive form trembled with what appeared to be fear. The dragon told Amy that the Void Collective had returned. The ancient enemy that had created the quantum parasites was coming back to finish what they had started thousands of years ago. Amy looked out at the 13,000 ships that had gathered to protect her, and realized that they might not be enough. The Void Collective had been consuming entire worlds for millennia, and their biomechanical ships were resistant to conventional weapons. But Amy had something the Void Collective did not expect. Her nanobots had evolved beyond simple healing. They could now adapt to any biological threat in real time. The enemy had spent eons perfecting biological weapons, but Amy had created the ultimate biological defense. The dragon explained that the Void Collective was not evil in the traditional sense. They were a species that had been corrupted by their own biological experiments, and were now driven by an endless hunger to consume other life forms. They could not help what they had become. Amy made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She would not just defend against the Void Collective, she would try to heal them. The nanobots that could cure any disease might be able to reverse whatever had corrupted the ancient enemy. Jake thought Amy was taking too big a risk, but she had made up her mind. The galaxy had seen enough suffering and death. If there was even a chance that the Void Collective could be healed rather than destroyed, she had to try. Admiral Johnson began coordinating the defense of the system with commanders from dozens of different species. The Alliance fleet was impressive, but they were about to face an enemy that had been perfecting the art of consumption for thousands of years. Amy worked frantically to modify her nanobots for the coming battle. She had to create a version that could spread through the Void Collective's biomechanical ships and heal the corruption at its source. It was the most ambitious project she had ever attempted. Zephyros positioned himself at the front of the Alliance fleet and began to glow with an energy that Amy had never seen before. The ancient dragon was preparing for a battle that would determine the future of every living thing in the galaxy. As the Void Collective fleet drew closer, Amy could see that the enemy's ships were not just vessels. They were twisted combinations of consumed civilizations. Each ship contained the corrupted remains of worlds that had been devoured. The sight filled her with both horror and determination. The battle for the future of all life in the galaxy was about to begin, and Amy knew that her nanobots were the key to victory. But victory would not come through destruction. It would come through healing even the most corrupted enemy. The weight of 13,000 ships and countless lives pressing down on her shoulders made Amy feel smaller than she had ever felt before. The Alliance fleet had grown beyond anything she could have imagined, but with it came expectations that seemed impossible to meet. Every species represented in the Armada was looking to her for salvation from an enemy that had been unstoppable for millennia. Pete Anderson sat across from Amy in her laboratory aboard Zephyros' living ship and tried to convince her to return to Earth. The Medical Council on Humanity homeworld wanted Amy to come back and establish mass production facilities for her nanobiotic technology. Pete argued that Earth could protect her better than any alien alliance. Amy refused her mentor's request because she knew that returning to Earth would mean abandoning millions of beings who needed her help. The galaxy was full of suffering that only her technology could address. She could not turn her back on that responsibility. even if staying meant putting herself in greater danger. Jake Miller supported Amy's decision, but he was worried about the political pressure building around them. The Galactic Senate had increased their demands and were now threatening to declare the Alliance fleet an illegal occupation force. Several member species were calling for Amy to be arrested as a terrorist. Katie Brown helped. Amy reviewed the medical data they had collected from patients across dozens of species. The results showed that biological weapons were being used far more widely than anyone had suspected. Almost every species had been affected by diseases that were clearly artificial in origin. Ben Walsh made a discovery that changed their understanding of the enemy. They faced the quantum parasites that had blinded Zephyros, were just one type of weapon in a vast arsenal. The Void Collective had been seeding the galaxy with biological agents for thousands of years, weakening civilizations before consuming them. Zephyros revealed more about the ancient war that had driven his people into hiding. The Drakmari had not always been neutral knowledge keepers. They had once been the galaxy's primary defense against the Void Collective, but the cost of that war had nearly destroyed them. The dragon explained that the Void Collective had once been a peaceful species called the Ancients, who had helped seed life throughout the galaxy, but their experiments with biological enhancement had gone wrong and corrupted them into the consuming nightmare they had become. Mamie realized that her nanobots represented the same kind of biological manipulation that had created the Void Collective in the first place. The difference was that her technology was designed to heal and restore, rather than enhance and dominate. But the potential for corruption was still. Their commander, Ryan Phillips, brought Amy disturbing intelligence reports that showed Vorthan Syndicate ships moving to intercept supply convoys heading for the Alliance fleet. The enemy was trying to starve them out, while the Void Collective approached from the outer system. Admiral Kate Johnson coordinated with alien commanders to establish defensive positions around Kepler 442c, but everyone knew that conventional tactics would not work against the Void Collective. Their biomechanical ships could adapt to any weapon and heal damage faster than it could be inflicted. Damie worked around the clock to develop new versions of her nanobots that could counter the Void Collective's adaptive abilities. She had to create something that could evolve faster than the enemy could adapt. The healing robots would need to become weapons of restoration, rather than destruction. The first probing attacks came from the edge of the solar system, where long-range sensors detected Void Collective scout ships testing the Alliance's defenses. These smaller vessels were still massive by normal standards, but they were nothing compared to the main fleet that was still approaching. Subforus engaged the scout ships with energy beams that seemed to disrupt their biomechanical systems. The dragon had learned to fight the Void Collective during the Ancient War, and his attacks were specifically designed to interfere with their adaptive capabilities. Zemi watched the battle through the ship's organic viewing system and saw how the Void Collective vessels tried to heal the damage Zephyros was inflicting. The ships were essentially living creatures that could regenerate lost parts, but they needed time to adapt to new types of damage. Dr. Pete Anderson finally understood what Amy was planning when he saw her latest nanobots in action. The new healing robots did not just repair damage, they actively converted corrupted biological matter back to its original healthy state. Amy was planning to heal the Void Collective ships, rather than destroy them. The concept was brilliant, but incredibly dangerous. If the nanobots could not convert the corruption fast enough, they would be absorbed and turned into part of the enemy. Amy was risking not just her own life, but the possibility that her healing technology would make the Void Collective even more powerful. Jake tried to talk Amy out of her plan by showing her simulations that demonstrated the risks. But Amy had made up her mind. She believed that the only way to truly defeat an enemy driven by corruption was to heal that corruption, even if it meant risking everything. Katie Brown helped Amy prepare the nanobots for mass deployment across the Alliance fleet. Every ship would carry healing charges that could be fired at the Void Collective vessels. The entire armada would become a weapon of restoration rather than Ethereal Collective provided advanced delivery systems that could penetrate the Void Collective's Adaptive Defenses Ambassador Lyra explained that her people had been working on ways to fight the ancient enemy for centuries, but had never considered trying to heal. The Admiral Johnson expressed her concerns about using untested technology in such a critical battle, but she also recognized that conventional weapons had never been effective against the Void Collective. Amy healing approach might be their only chance for victory. Dard Ben Walsh discovered that the Void Collective main fleet was larger than anyone had anticipated. Long-range sensors showed over 50,000 biomechanical ships approaching the system. Each vessel was the size of a small moon and contained the absorbed remains of entire civilizations. Amy felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her as she realized that the fate of every living thing in the galaxy might depend on whether her nanobots could heal corruption that had been growing for thousands of years. The technology that had started as a simple way to help injured aliens had become humanity's gift to the universe's. Frost told Amy about the sacred stellar maps he carried and offered to share the ancient knowledge with her. If something happened to him, the dragon was preparing for the possibility that he might not survive the coming battle, but he wanted to ensure that the wisdom of his people would continue. Amy refused to consider the possibility of losing Zephyros, because the ancient dragon had become more than just her protector. He represented the connection between past and future, between the wisdom of ages and the hope of new discoveries. The Alliance fleet formed into defensive formations around the planet as the Void Collective main force entered the outer system. The enemy ships moved like a living wave of corruption that consumed everything in their path, including asteroids and space. Dostami made final preparations for the nanobots that would either save the galaxy or doom it to an even worse fate. The healing robots were loaded into every weapon system in the Alliance fleet, turning instruments of war into tools of restoration. As the two fleets moved toward their inevitable confrontation, Amy looked out at the stars and wondered if she was about to witness the end of suffering in the galaxy, or the beginning of an even greater nightmare. The next few hours would determine whether healing could triumph over corruption. The battle that would decide the fate of all life in the universe was about to begin, and Amy knew that everything depended on whether love and compassion could overcome fear and hatred. She had started this journey by healing a blind dragon, and now she was trying to heal an entire species. Admiral Johnson gave the order for all ships to prepare for combat, but Amy knew that this would not be a battle in any traditional sense. It would be a test of whether the power to heal was stronger than the drive to consume. The Void Collective fleet emerged from the darkness between stars, like a nightmare made real. 50,000 biomechanical ships each. One a twisted fusion of consumed worlds and corrupted lifeforms moved toward the Alliance fleet with inevitable hunger. Amy watched from Zephyros command center as the enemy vessels approached like a living plague that devoured everything in its path. Admiral Kate Johnson coordinated the Alliance response from her flagship while trying to maintain formation among 13,000 ships from dozens of different species. The diversity that made the fleet strong also made it difficult to command, but every captain understood that they were fighting for the survival of all life in the galaxy. Amy felt her heart racing as she made final adjustments to the nanobots that would either save everything or destroy it. The healing robots had been modified to work faster than ever before, but they had never been tested against corruption as ancient and deep as what infected the Void Collective. Jake Miller monitored the bioship's systems while Katie Brown prepared the nanobots for mass deployment. Dr. Ben Walsh tracked the enemy fleet movements and tried to predict where the first contact would occur. Everyone knew that the next few hours would determine whether the galaxy had a future. As Zephyros positioned himself at the front of the Alliance formation and began to glow with energy that Amy had never seen before. The ancient dragon was drawing on power that had been building for thousands of years, preparing for a confrontation that would either end the threat to all life or consume him. In the 10th, the first Void Collective ships reached weapons range and opened fire with beams of pure corruption that tried to infect anything they touched. Alliance shields held against the initial assault, but Amy could see the biomechanical weapons adapting and evolving to penetrate their defenses. Commander Ryan Phillips coordinated the Alliance response as thousands of ships fired healing charges at the approaching enemy. The nanobots spread through space like silver clouds and began to make contact with the Void Collective vessels. What happened next amazed everyone who witnessed it. Instead of being absorbed and corrupted, the nanobots began to convert the biomechanical ships back to their original forms. Amy watched in wonder as sections of enemy vessels transformed from twisted nightmares into the beautiful, organic ships they had been before corruption took hold. But the process was not fast enough. The Void Collective had spent millennia perfecting their corruption, and it fought back against the healing nanobots. Some enemy ships began to change, but others adapted and developed resistance to the restoration process. Amy realized that she needed to get closer to the enemy fleet to make her nanobots more effective. The biomechanical ships were too large and too heavily corrupted for the healing robots to work from a distance. She had to find a way to get the nanobots directly into the heart of the enemy formations. Ares understood what Amy needed without being told. The ancient dragon began to move toward the Void Collective fleet, while protecting Amy command center with energy shields that deflected the corruption beams. Alliance ships provided cover fire, but everyone knew this was incredibly dangerous. Pete Anderson tried to convince Amy to stay back and coordinate from a safe distance, but she refused to let others take risks that she was not willing to take herself. The nanobots were her creation and her responsibility. She had to see this through to the end. As they approached the enemy fleet, Amy could see the true horror of what the Void Collective had become. The ships were not just vessels, they were the absorbed remains of countless civilizations, twisted into forms that served only consumption and corruption. Amy activated her most powerful nanobots and fired them directly into the largest enemy ship. The healing robots penetrated the biomechanical hull and began to work from the inside, converting corruption back to its original healthy state. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The massive Void Collective vessel began to transform as the nanobots spread through its structure. What had been a nightmare of twisted metal and corrupted flesh became a beautiful organic ship that pulsed with healthy life. The corruption was being healed from within, but something unexpected happened as the healing process continued. The ship did not just become healthy, it began to remember what it had been before corruption took hold. Amy realized that she was not just healing tissue, she was restoring memories and consciousness. A voice spoke from the transformed ship in a language that was older than any known civilization. The being inside was grateful and confused, asking what had happened to them and where they were. Amy understood that she had just awakened someone who had been consumed thousands of years ago. The success of the first healing inspired Amy to push forward even though the danger was extreme. Zephyros carried her deeper into the enemy fleet, while Alliance ships provided cover. The ancient dragon used his energy beams to disrupt enemy formations, while Amy fired nanobots at every ship within range. Ben Walsh monitored the healing process from the New Dawn and reported that the nanobots were not just restoring individual ships, they were creating a chain reaction. As each vessel was healed, it began to help heal others, spreading the restoration faster than corruption could adapt. Katie Brown coordinated with the Alliance fleet to target specific enemy ships. With concentrated nanobot charges, the strategy was working, but it required perfect timing and coordination among thousands of ships from dozens of different species. Admiral Johnson watched the battle unfold and realized that they were witnessing something that had never happened before in galactic history. An enemy that had been unstoppable for millennia was being defeated not through destruction, but through healing and restoration. The tide of battle began to turn as more Void Collective ships were restored to their original forms. The healed vessels immediately stopped attacking and began to help with the restoration process. Amy had created an army of healers from what had been an army of destroyers, but the core of the Void Collective fleet contained the oldest and most heavily corrupted ships. These vessels had been consumed so long ago that their original forms were barely recognizable. They fought back against the healing with desperate fury. He knew that she had to reach the heart of the enemy fleet where the corruption was strongest. Zephyros understood her determination, and carried her toward the massive command ship that led the Void Collective. The ancient dragon was wounded by corruption beams but refused to retreat. Jake Miller begged Amy to reconsider as they approached the enemy flagship. The corruption there was so dense that it seemed to warp space itself around the ship. Amy knew that if her nanobots failed here, the entire galaxy would be lost. Amy fired every nanobot she had left at the Void Collective command ship and watched as the healing robots penetrated the deepest layers of corruption. What they found there was beyond anything she had expected. The ship contained not just one consciousness, but thousands of absorbed civilizations. The healing process took hours as the nanobots worked to separate and restore each individual consciousness that had been consumed. Amy watched in amazement as the massive ship began to break apart, not from damage but from restoration. Each absorbed civilization was being returned to its original form. When the process was complete, Amy found herself surrounded by thousands of ships representing civilizations that had been thought lost forever. The beings aboard these vessels were confused and grateful, but they were alive and free from corruption. Leader of the restored ancients contacted Amy through Zephyr's communication system and thanked her for ending their nightmare. The being explained that they had been trapped in corruption for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be themselves. Amy realized that she had not just won a battle, she had restored an entire galaxy worth of civilizations that had been consumed over millennia. The Void Collective had been defeated not through violence, but through healing, and the galaxy was richer for it. The grateful ancients offered to share their knowledge with Amy and help her establish healing centers throughout the galaxy. They wanted to spend the rest of their existence helping to repair the damage that their corruption had caused. Jephiros was badly wounded from the battle, but Amy was able to heal him with her nanobots. The ancient dragon was proud of what they had accomplished together and looked forward to a future where healing was more important than conquest. Amy returned to her research, but now she had the support of civilizations from across 3 galaxies. The Galactic Healing Institute was established aboard Zephyr's ship and began traveling from world to world, bringing hope and health to all species. Jake Miller and Katie Brown joined Amy as permanent partners in her healing work, while Dr. Ben Walsh returned to Earth to share what they had learned. The knowledge gained from healing the Void Collective advanced medical science by thousands of years. Johnson and the Earth Fleet escorted Amy for several months before returning home. The alliance that had formed to protect one human healer evolved into a permanent organization dedicated to spreading healing throughout the galaxy. Amy looked out at the stars from her laboratory aboard Zephyr's ship and smiled as she thought about all the good they could do together. The galaxy was vast and full of suffering, but it was also full of hope and the power to heal. The ancient dragon had become her closest friend, and together they traveled from system to system, helping species take their first steps into a galactic community based on cooperation rather than competition. Amy had started by healing one blind dragon and ended up healing an entire galaxy. The story that began with compassion for a suffering creature had become a legend that would inspire healers for generations to come. Amy Carter, the human who healed a blind alien dragon, had shown the universe that love and healing were more powerful than hatred and destruction.